And hello, everybody. Welcome to Narativ Live. It's a Thursday evening. We're back with another big show tonight. And tonight, it's part 2 of The Dragon's Tale, where we're looking at the relationship between Rupert Murdoch and Jared Kushner. And there's some big exclusive news that we have hidden in that show. Not so hidden, but in that segment, we'll show you that a little bit later on. Eric Garland is back with us. Eric, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Zev?
You know, every time I see you, I just get cheerful because it's so nice to see you. You just make me happy. So I'm glad you're here.
You make me happy too, Zev.
You're the one person I can speak to about all this stuff, and here you are. So you had a great interview the other night, on Tuesday night, by the way, which I'm still, processing because I just think the size and scope of what you and Robert Buckland are busy exposing is so massive. And if people haven't seen that interview, it'll be available as a podcast in the next couple of days. But also, you should go check it out on our previous live stream. But it had an enormous reaction online, and quite deservedly so. So, how are you feeling about that now that we've processed it for a couple of days?
It's the toothpaste is not going back in the tube on this one. There have been so many brave survivors of these trafficking networks masquerading as schools, rehabilitation centers, charitable centers, helping disabled people incorporate back into mainstream life, when in reality it's slave labor. There have been so many survivors of this that they're all kind of coming together with the power of different internet, social media, forums, and a lot of them, I've just interviewed new ones since we did our show the other night who weren't aware of some of what has been happening in Missouri. I've been hearing from people as far away as Florida and Maine who all have the same kind of story. And this is the beginning of exposing a terrible truth about how many fortunes have been built on the back of slave labor. I mean, it's 400 years and counting. Mm-hmm. We kind of essentially tried to put a technical pause in 1865 with the 13th Amendment, but apparently, guys, it didn't take. So we got to finish the job.
I mean, what you're saying, and I think I mentioned this to you on the phone earlier on, is that you're sort of beginning to poke at the underbelly of the story that we have been coming at from another direction. We've been looking at the mob from a big picture perspective and how foreign influence has been corrupted by the mob, or vice versa. I'm not sure which corrupted which, but that it has been, really corrupted our country. But what you're seeing from the inside out is that there is a lot of organized criminal activity, which is the kind of stuff that we'd all shake our heads at. We would never believe this would be happening inside America, things like slavery today. And you're beginning to expose that from the inside out. And I think it's a laudable work, and we'll continue to cover it with you, but there's so much here. And as you point out, everyone who responded to your interview the other day from many, many states, a lot of people on YouTube and elsewhere were commenting about this has just been part of the fabric of American society for a long time. And it has to end. I mean, surely now is the time where all of this has to end. And hopefully we'll continue to do that. And congratulations on your good work for doing that so far.
More where that comes from. But we got to look at the big picture too. So that's we're getting back to our great serial here.
Yeah, that's going to come in the next second half hour. But I first want to touch on some of the news stories because there's so much good stuff. Firstly, I mean, it's not even good. If Donald Trump is going to get indicted, people, I mean, it's clear to me. I'm not inside the prosecutor's office, but it's clear to me that that's where we're heading. There's now about 50 to 75 subpoenas that have been out there that are, requesting documents and requesting information. We see that Mark Meadows is now basically flipping. I mean, you can read between the lines that he's flipping. He is not officially flipped, but that it seems to me what is happening. And Donald Trump himself is scared. He's now saying that there will be big problems for the United States if he's indicted in the stolen document scandal. And there are big problems for the United States because of the document scandal, not just because he's going to get indicted for it. This is turning out to be a massive international espionage scandal, the details of which we can't even talk about yet, but they aren't going to be revealed in the next few weeks. But this implied threat of big problems for the United States. This, along with the other day, he was calling for the QAnon storm, and suddenly we saw Epstein come up again in Twitter last night. These are, I would say they're dog whistles, but they're not even dog whistles. They're just a call to arms for Americans to basically start a civil war based on this absolute criminal mobster, breaking the law repeatedly in a way that can't even be imagined or fathomed. And now he's calling on people to start a civil war on his behalf. That's basically what he's saying in all these.
For the second time in 2 years.
The second time in 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Not long after some of the Agape school came up and there was quite a brouhaha, all of a sudden Governor Parson here in Missouri, he puts out a tweet about this Patriot Training Center that where snipers can train. I don't know, as a citizen here, that kind of felt threatening. Like, why is the governor telling snipers where to go practice? Can anyone help me with that?
I mean, this whole militia buildup, the whole GOP infrastructure in these red states seems to be, basically a mob organization. And, we've seen it time and time again. It's going to be very hard, but people have to really, as we head into these elections, focus on organizing yourselves into making sure that in every possible way, the GOP is not allowed into any of these seats that are up for election this coming November. It's just so vital that there's a big enough mandate that we win the House, that we hopefully win the Senate. And I say we, I'm never siding with a political party, but this time I'm siding with the side of democracy. And, the only way to save democracy is with the Democratic Party winning the Senate, the Democratic Party winning the House, and also the Democratic Party winning a lot more of these governorships and a lot more of these state houses. And that's the only way that that's going to happen. Now, some of that is going to be too possible to do. But
you mean you're describing the 30, 40-year strategy of the Koch brothers and Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society? Like, that's what the bad guys were doing here.
Yeah, that's exactly where we've been for the last 40 years. Yeah.
By the way, note, I don't put that as Republicans, though a lot of these guys do run the Republican Party now. I'm talking about, there's plenty of good Republicans out there and plenty of good Republican talent that if they could get, a word in edgewise versus these mobsters, that, they'd be the counterbalance to occasional liberal excess that the country really needs. We're not going to be a mono-party state, and I don't think we're intended to be.
No.
But
the point behind democracy is that you have multiple parties. That's the point. And, we're a pro-democracy outfit here. But I will say that in this case, there is no room for the MAGA GOP. There's just no room for criminal activity like this, which has been sweeping this country for the last at least 5-6 years, but obviously much longer. We'll speak more about the corruption inside the Trump administration in the next half hour. But let there be no doubt that there is no future for this country if the GOP wins the House and the Senate. I mean, then we're in real trouble, and there's absolutely no room for that kind of even error in
not future,
history.
A crappier future.
Well, yeah. A future which I don't think people understand. I was reading today about the GOP now in Texas are now not even allowing people to get access to PrEP medications, which would stop the spread of HIV if as part of a religious exclusion thing that they've introduced with so now,
cool.
Now the GOP is encouraging the spread of HIV and AIDS in America because that is the kind of America that we want.
They're like a pro-biowarfare party.
Yeah, it's lost its path a long time ago. There is other news.
Makes Chinese intelligence happy, though. That's their jam. They love that kind of thing. I wonder if there's any, linkage in tasking anywhere. Just thinking out loud.
Well, speaking of which, there was a summit today between two world leaders. It took place in Uzbekistan, and Xi and Putin have decided they will inject stability into the world now.
The hot stability injection.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. It's interesting that everyone's sort of going crazy about the fact that, Putin suggested that Xi has some questions and concerns about Russia's failed war in Ukraine and other policies. And that was meant to be a big give in this meeting. But truly, they're
pissed because they paid for it.
Yeah, they paid for it. And now they can't do Taiwan because of it. But this has been, these two people are probably responsible for everything that's happened in the last 6 years. I mean, whether they, you can argue about who took the lead on what front, but this alliance of the Chinese and Russians to foster, basically fascism across the world and to disrupt democracies around the world, including the American democracy, has so much gold in it and so much disgusting corruption and criminal activity in it that it just boggles my mind that the people in these countries are not raising up them, are not up in arms trying to remove these people from power. It seems unbelievable to me that Putin is still in power after this horrific genocide that he's committed in Ukraine. And Xi as well. I mean, maybe this is part of the Western world which thinks maybe Xi is more stable than whoever might come next. But what these people have brought to the world over the last few years, and now they're injecting stability after wreaking havoc for 5 years. Now is the time when they want to inject stability. It's maddening. And
nothing screams stability like the regime of Uzbekistan. There's nothing as stable as literally boiling your political opponents, which they were doing like 20 years ago, ish. Islam Karimov. And that's where look, they're not in Reykjavik. They're not in Geneva. Putin's push into Western Europe certainly didn't make it all the way to Madrid. That's kind of nice, right? I mean,
it didn't make it anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, by the way, did you see that yesterday the American intelligence world, community, whatever you want to call it, put out this thing that's their estimate is that Putin paid $300 million to basically inject himself into political campaigns around the world, including the United States. $300 million, basically in an attempt to increase fascism around the world. It's paid off very poorly for him. That was a bad investment. But $300 million is what the U.S. officials now officially say is what Putin invested in by bringing us the likes of Donald Trump and Berlusconi and not Berlusconi. I want to talk about Brazil.
It's the term "at least $3 million" does an enormous amount of work there. It's way more than that. If you know how much the budget for keeping intelligence officers in the field for a month is, that's ridiculous. It's a crazy number. It's just to put something in the paper.
Yeah, it's $300 million. $300 million is still a lot of money. If it's just in terms of bribes of officials.
If you said he spent that in 2016 and 2018 on just Facebook ads, I might believe that.
Yeah.
But regardless, whatever he spent, it's not how much he's going to pay. He's going to pay a whole lot more. How much do you think these sanctions are? They're more than $300 million, don't you think?
Oh, I sure think they are affecting the Russian economy more than $300 million. But, he is given a little bit of a lifeline by the Biden administration, which I find always interesting. They've given him just enough room to keep the economy going. And I bet you there's a reason for all of that, which we'll find out in the future. You mentioned as well on your feed today, which I found really interesting, that this guy's going to have a trial soon. Is that right? Did I see that correctly?
It's a historic day on Monday. If you follow Brandon Van Grack, who was the head of the Foreign Agent Registration Unit at the National Security Division. You also might recognize Mr. Van Grack's name from the Mueller investigation, which he ran effectively. He was saying on his feed, and he would know, being somebody that prosecuted and investigated not just the Mueller era stuff, but also all sorts of foreign agent stuff after the fact. Mr. Tom Barrack here, who is, of course, an old pal of Paul Manafort, met him in Saudi Arabia in 1972, CEO of Colony Capital, Donald Trump's business partner in that crappy hotel that was downtown that they used as a spy trap and money laundering place. Barrack is accused, among other things, of being an unregistered agent of the United Arab Emirates attempting to influence American policy at the highest level on behalf of the Emirati government. And he's charged with 18 U.S. Code 951, which is a very serious foreign agent charge. It's not just the bureaucratic charge for people that are doing PR for a foreign principal without registering, like doing PR campaigns or, trying to get op-eds placed. This is the same criminal charge that was levied against the Russian illegals program in 2010. That was the Anna Chapman gang, if you recognize the most attractive member of the crew there. One of the guys I met, actually. Oh. Yeah, and so those guys got scooped up in 2010 and deported back to Russia, and they were charged with 18 U.S. Code 951. And these were like GRU, cream of the crop, posing as other nationalities in the United States, top level
real spies versus assets versus people of influence.
You got somebody who's got an unfortunate video of them and a goat and a high definition camera. No, this is like real spies, and that's what Mr. Barrack is being charged with, and he is only the second person to go to trial on this. So note I'm not sure that the Russian guys pleaded out or anything. They got deported. In fact, those 10 guys were swapped among another guy, Sergei Skripal, who was apparently an MI6 mole in the GRU in Russia. So they traded that. Classic. They stopped the plane at Vienna, apparently, and they both got out on the tarmac, got in each other's planes, and poosh, back to their home country.
And then Putin tried to kill Skripal.
And then Putin tried to kill Skripal in the UK with Novichok. So that's the level we're playing at. So no one's ever been to, there's only one other case that's been to trial. So Tom Barrack is going, who was thick as thieves with Donald Trump, set up Donald Trump's inauguration, people.
Yeah, he was the head of the chairman of the inauguration committee, if I recall correctly.
Yes, he was.
He was handling a lot of money being brought into the country from foreign sources, perhaps, to influence the Trump campaign by donating to the inauguration committee. So
that's right.
Yeah, Mr. Barack was very busy and has been for many years as an ally of Trump's, but also of Jeffrey Epstein's along the way and others, mob figures. So it's interesting. He's been tied to UAE, as you mentioned now, but also to the Saudis at various times.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's the host with the most. He knows everybody. Mm-hmm. And, but more important, the recent stuff is the most important. He had half ownership of the Trump Hotel, which was a money laundering joint. It was the staging ground for the January 6th attack. It was a source of emoluments for the president. But let's just go back to the first days, the inauguration. This guy set up bribes from all over the world for these idiots. So, and we've been talking about this for so long now. We're almost, 6 full years out from this. In January, it'll be 6 years when these things happened, right? And we're finally, we're through enough of these layers that we can get down to some of the things that happened 6 years ago at the inauguration. It's kind of crazy, but
the wheels of justice, they grind slowly, but they grind fine, as they point out in the end of that saying. And I think it's very true as we look at how deep these investigations are going and how many people are going to jail for this now. And, as I said the other day, I think the mood in Washington is they're no longer entertaining Trump in any way whatsoever. They are after him. DOJ is after him. They're going to go get him, and they will get him. And the sooner he realizes that, the better off, we'll all be. We do not know the extent of the espionage case in Mar-a-Lago, and that's going to continue to be large and I think very threatening. The latest assessment I heard was that the threat to national security was grave. That's a big word for national security people to be using that kind of language regarding a national security assessment. So watch this space. Also, watch this space. Everyone is busy burying Mr. Durham. Oh, God, could you see the press was just having a field day telling us how it's all over and fizzled out and what have you. It's not over yet, guys.
Oh, you can't get Sergei Milian. There's a guy in Russia that won't fly here to testimony. It must be, to testify. It must all be done. That's it.
It's not over yet, guys. I know everyone doesn't like Durham because, God forbid he raises some questions about how we got here, but I'm entertaining him still. I want to see what happens at this particular next hearing because Danchenko is going. That's right. That's the guy's name, Danchenko. He's going to be. He's the former head of FBI counterintelligence that is going under trial, right, or something like that. It's quite a serious.
There was a disclosure.
Yeah.
Today in an Insider, there was a disclosure of a grand jury document that was interesting. I'm not sure how that came to be public, but it was looking for any information of connections to whoever this letter was aimed at, and a guy who was the head of counterintelligence for the FBI for the city of New York or the New York field office. That would make him a subject of the investigation, I believe, in the technical terms. Not a target necessarily yet, but a subject, somebody who is proximate to a crime they're investigating. And he and another person mentioned in that
an FBI counterintelligence chief.
I think he was the head of counterintelligence in 2015-16. So remember the run-up? And, FBI finds no connection to Russians investigating Donald Trump. He would have been kind of the head of the counterintelligence for guys in New York. So maybe he's the source of that code even. Or, it's interesting. It's curious. And there's another guy. And there was a whole, they were looking for information on some really interesting characters in that grand jury investigation. But in any event, that ties back to this era of the Steele dossier and, how that narrative in the media, pushed by the media, overtook the actual intelligence community trying to do real serious work. And much like the inauguration thing, we need to find out what was behind not just the, how did Donald Trump become president, but how did our media keep lying to Americans about the whole situation? I mean,
yeah, we do. We do. We absolutely need to find out what happened to that Steele dossier. And we have to know what happened to the Mueller. I mean, it's not okay to just let Rod Rosenstein land the plane by creating a special counsel investigation, which was so limiting that it could only focus on Russia, when we know now, as we've been saying here on Narrative for many years, that it was, much more than that. There was an alliance of countries, nations, and networks that were the enemies of democracy that have been targeting America in various ways over the last few years. Why was the DOJ's official investigation narrowed only to Russia? And if it was so,
not just to Russia.
Yeah.
It was hyper specific. It was cut so fine so that they would have no right to bring charges on the things that they would find. Mm-hmm. It's almost like Rosenstein knew what the real game was, and he knew what they'd find and what they wouldn't, because, when he authorized it, he would have had one of the highest level clearances. He may have had access to what really happened and then corruptly designed the outline of the Mueller report in advance so that, first of all, I mean, who was the first guy that they're talking about? Carter Page, who we know was a confidential informant working on behalf of the U.S. government. Mm-hmm.
And he was also, working for others, but that's okay. That's what confidential informants do. The question, which Rod Rosenstein know? Of course he must have known. And then you add that to Bill Barr's ridiculous handling of the Mueller report and when it was finally released, and the, incorrect, not even incorrect, criminally incorrect assessment that he drew from the actual Mueller report. And on top of that, all the latest allegations from Jeffrey Berman about what Bill Barr was doing inside the Department of Justice. And you've got a Department of Justice run amok. And, I'm very curious as to what happened there. And I think it's one of those things we really have to learn about, because if we don't learn about it, this will happen again. And yes, there are people on both sides of the DOJ and the media divide that are influencing each other in terrible ways. There's no doubt about that. And we need to find out exactly who they are, and we need to make sure that they're no longer in place to do that in the future. We're going to talk a lot about Rupert Murdoch and Wendy Deng again in tonight's special serial, part 2 of The Dragon's Tail. But it kind of ties into this Danchenko allegation that I found this clip as I was researching Wendy Deng and Rupert Murdoch, that involves one Louise Mensch, who many of you on Twitter will know as, I don't know what you would know her as, take your pick, but the leader of the resistance, or maybe something else. She, before her history in the United States being an operator, working for Rupert Murdoch, trying to basically poison the Twitter well by identifying people who were, patriots or not patriots in her terms, or whatever else she decided to do. Before she did that, she was working for Rupert Murdoch. And I still believe she's working for Rupert Murdoch right now. She also works, just to full disclosure here, for a guy named John Vane, who is a media mogul with interesting international connections, has been doing all sorts of operational activities in the United States, including with a woman named Stephanie Koff, which we've worked with before. I'm not going into that again, but I'm just saying that that's the network with which you are seeing. These are people who also helped cover up the Epstein investigation and other realities of Epstein. But before all of that, in 2011, she was pretending to be a member of parliament. Well, she was a member of parliament, Louise Mensch was. Only she was one of those member of parliaments that was sort of in the service of Rupert Murdoch. So when this giant hacking scandal happened in 2011, Rupert Murdoch, James Murdoch were hauled before a commission. They were spying on people by accessing their phone voicemails. She was the one who was in the committee asking questions of Rupert and James Murdoch. And Wendy Deng is there as well in this clip. Wendy Deng is seated right behind Rupert Murdoch. And what happened on this day was a journalist of some sort came in and pied Rupert Murdoch in the face with a cream pie. It all seems like a giant stunt to me, involving all these players. They basically wanted to distract people from what was going on in the commission that day. So they thought, let's bring a guy to pie in James Murdoch. But the clip is kind of wonderful. So here's Louise Mensch from 2011 with Rupert Murdoch and James Murdoch, and watch for Wendy Deng's massively impressive knockdown of the guy. Here we go.
Can you just tell me whether or not the Taylor settlement included a confidentiality clause, and maybe the other settlement did not?
slow motion. Here's James Murdoch reacting. There is Wendy Deng coming up in the pink, I guess, and then she knocks this guy down by reaching over with that overhead thrust of a punch. Louise Mensch standing up in horror. Here comes the policeman finally. Oh, yeah. Time to arrest this man.
It's a Bobby, too.
It's a Bobby. Yeah.
Really, you got... okay.
I think Louise Mensch's reaction is quite quick there.
Is it a BAFTA? Is that what they have for like the Academy Awards? I forget.
They have the BAFTA. Yes, they have the BAFTA.
The BAFTA. Did they win a BAFTA for this? I mean, it's quite well done. Oh, that's very good. That's very.
They should have won the BAFTA
Bobby,
for that.
I hope he got a Best Supporting Actor.
They should have won that. I mean, this was clearly the thing. Is, I mean, looking back at this in hindsight, you know the whole thing was contrived because look how quickly Louise Mensch stands up right there.
Look, you got to make a GIF of the facial expressions. Oh snap!
Hey, Louise, nice to see you. We're watching you still. Nice. I hope you're watching us. I'm sure you are. So this is the crowd we're dealing with, you know?
Pie.
Yeah.
Pie. Okay, turn the clip off. Turn the clip off. Oh, my God.
I couldn't resist it. I laughed so much when I first saw that. I was like, I just got to play this for Eric because he's going to love it.
Wendy Deng's got a right hook, guys. Do not tangle with Wendy.
Well, she must have some training to be that good. I mean, that was impressive. She went right in and knocked this guy out. This was.
Did she snap his neck? I didn't see the rest of that. I mean, before we get to like full Red Sparrow, American season 2 stuff, we need to see like, did she like just crack his vertebra or what?
I think he was fine because I think maybe he was expecting all of this. But it's interesting. They were already in the midst of not the best part of their relationship at this point because she was having an affair with Tony Blair at the time.
There's lies. Who cares where they put the pee-pee part?
Yeah, but she was having an affair with Tony Blair and this upset Rupert Murdoch because he was trying to run the United Kingdom with Tony. And then, he's got this Chinese spy interfering in his things and he's, whatever. Who knows what's cases? Who knows?
Every time you date a Chinese spy, it's the same thing.
Until then, have a good night. Good night, Eric. Every minute of Narrative's reporting, every story that we break is made possible by our patrons. You too can become a patron by joining at patreon.com/narrative.
Narrative, where truth lives. One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narrative, where truth lives.